Sabrina Siga is one of the most well-known artists in Chennai, in fact, in the whole of the south of this country. She began to paint in 1979, and her work has been primarily horses because her husband, who was in the armed forces, was a great horse lover. And then suddenly in 2000, she decided to switch to biblical art. And we've invited her here today to talk about that particular aspect of her work. Thank you, Sabrina, for coming. Why did you want to switch?
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for inviting me to speak about something that's so dear to my heart. Yes, the majestic horse was what I was doing. And as you said, it started with me having married John and being around horses as he was a polo player, sketching and being there in the stables, sketching horses from real life and seeing the majesty of these animals. A few years later, I was commissioned to do paintings for the very prestigious Bombay Natural History Society on birds and flowers, which were the Indian endangered species. And I did that and I enjoyed it so much. And I was just thinking, here we have the majestic, powerful animal, the horse, and then we have the beautiful, delicate birds and also the beautiful, colorful flowers. All of this, what was there? The center of all this was our Creator, the grand designer of our universe. And as I was delving more into God's word at that time, from 79 onwards, I was learning more about my God who created everything. And after each day that he finished something, he said, and it is good. So everything that I was even drawing was good. And then I go from Genesis, I go into Exodus, and chapter 31, verse 1, he's talking to Moses and telling them, the people who had come out from Egypt, from bondage, they needed to build a tabernacle. And God is giving every detail to Moses as to how he wanted it built. And he says, I have called by name Bezalel and Aholiab, both from the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Dan, to do beautiful works. I have placed in them the spirit of artistic knowledge, and that hit me. And I thought, oh my God, all this while I was painting right from a young age, I was always known to be a good artist, and I used to think, okay, this is in my DNA. My mother was good in art, and in school getting prizes every year. The art prize would come to me, and wildlife competitions, I would win prizes. All of this, but it was very casual. But when I came to Exodus and I read this, it was so amazing. It really humbled me to know that God's Spirit is what is filling me to do good works. And these people, these artists, were doing it in that tabernacle for the glory of God. And I wanted to declare Christ and glorify Him through the talent that He's blessed me with.
So you're obviously very, very interested in what you have switched to. When you talk about biblical art, is there any particular subject? For instance, there's so much in our Bible that, where is it about people? Is it about situations? Is it about happenings? Which of all these particular subjects did you decide that you were going to focus on, or has there been a focus at all?
When we talk about either Christian art or biblical art, we cannot do away without bringing in Jesus. You see, more has been written about this one individual in the history of the world, and more knowledge of him to the people around than any other person in the world. Everybody knows so much about Christ. So here, the Bible in the New Testament, it doesn't talk about what Jesus looked like. Even in the Old Testament, when they talk about God, they're not able to express themselves. Then Revelation, he's talking about jewel-like and the brilliance of God, but nobody is able to talk about what Jesus actually looked like. Even in the New Testament, he seemed to be a person that you could just walk by, but he drew people only by what he did and by what he spoke. And so when we think about Jesus, no other person actually in the whole world has inspired artists to do events of his life and his bringing out his personality, which is what I do at the moment.
Right. But interesting that you say that. We see so many depictions of Jesus, Did he look like this? Did he look like that? He was very handsome. Was he, what did he actually look like? So how do we know? And as an artist, how would you know what to paint him looking like? How?
Yeah, we start with the classical and the Renaissance period. You see, artists at that time, when Christianity came into being, it started by being, they were not given the freedom to paint or do anything, because you see the Roman emperors of that time, they were so powerful and they expected people to worship them, and that was absolutely against Judaism and Christianity. The Bible talks that, and the commandments say, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, and you will not worship anyone else but me. So that is when persecution came into being, and we see that in the catacombs where they were hiding and everywhere, you will only see symbols, and even these symbols were taken from the religions around. They didn't want to bring it out in the open because they were so worried about per se. But Constantine, when he came in, he recognized Christianity and they were allowed to flourish. That is when art, in that peaceful time, flourished, and they were able to depict figures. Even then it was it was only the Gothic art time. Gothic means, actually, it's a very degenerative word, meaning not a good, this is not good art. But at that time, Giotto was the one who first and foremost brought about the figure of Jesus, and he was able to, through light and shade, bring on a 3D image onto a 2-dimensional, say a mural or a fresco or a canvas.
So having said that, is there any portrait, if that's the right word, of Jesus that you follow? I mean, what does he look like?
Yeah.
Tell me.
So usually we imitate the artists that we learn about, and that's what happens. That's how we have, Munnings and Edwards. Those are the people that I used to try to imitate in my art on horses. They were the ones who inspired me as to how, and then brought about my own style.
So who inspires you now in this biblical art?
Giotto, I would say, and also you must realize there are a few others as well, especially when Christian art reached its zenith in the Renaissance time. We can never forget the 3 main artists that we all know about: Leonardo, Michelangelo, and we have Durer, and we have Rembrandt. They all depicted Jesus in their own way. So looking at those, that is what will actually inspire and will be helping me to make my own style of what Jesus really looked like.
So, Sabrina, have you actually, been to the Mecca of painting, I guess, which would be Rome and the Vatican and all the magnificent works of the masters that are there? Have you been there? Have you looked at it? Have you tried to, copy it, if that's the right word, or been inspired by it?
Inspired by it. Sadly, no. That's on my bucket list. But I've seen their works in other museums, but I've never gone to the place where I should be going, and that's Italy.
You better go quickly. Okay. Yeah. Now, where does Christian art and biblical art stand in this day and age, 2025?
There's a lot of it all over the world. You see, we have, before individual artists came about, we had these guilds of people with different talents, say for stained glass, the coloring of the stained glass, the lead that goes in it, the expertise that goes into that, and then the drawing, the cartoon as they call it, all of them together made these beautiful in cathedrals, the stained glasses, but you'll never see anybody's name there. It's only later on in the Medici, the rich Medici family of Italy, they wanted artists and they chose some who were very good to decorate their homes. So that's when individual art came into being. Right now, you have many artists all over the world who are doing Christian art. And in India as well, we do have artists who are doing biblical and Christian art, but there are no buyers.
That's very interesting comment. Why do you think that is the case? I mean, so that means Christian art is is not a very good business.
It's not a good business in India, but it's doing very well in other nations. But in India, I think people are more into posters and putting up biblical verses on their walls rather than having paintings of biblical and Christian art.
Right. Now, I know that you have had many shows, particularly of your works on horses, and I know that your paintings are all over the world, really. In terms of biblical art and Christian art, have you actually had any shows? How have those shows done? Where have you had those shows?
My first one in 2000 was in Delhi. I had around 30 paintings, and I think I sold 3 of those, which is so different from when I have my equine art exhibition. Even before the show, when you have the pre-show, they all sell out. But here, biblical and Christian art, which has now become so dear to me, is sadly not, in terms of money and selling, it's not there. We hardly have people even come to visit the exhibition. We had one with other artists in Bangalore. A group of us had one, about 25 artists. We had a show in Bangalore, and the college exhibition hall that we had in, the students came to see it, and we were able to explain what it all meant. But sadly, there was nobody who actually bought a single painting out of the 25 artists who exhibited their works.
So that really means that as Christians, we don't actually want to, invest in art, maybe have a painting somewhere of Christ or a biblical painting. Is that where this is coming from?
It seems so, that this is where it is, where we do not have enough people who are interested in art. They may not be having the value for a piece of art that, by spirit-filled artists. And I told you before, this is something that it's God-given, the talent, and to not appreciate it, that is what is sad in India.
Right. But you are well known, and therefore people would come to even see your work. But this is not very encouraging for a younger artist, is it? I mean, where do you see it going then, biblical art?
So it was quite, even though we had a lot of publicity, there were young artists, young women who came forward and put out their paintings. It was very discouraging for them that, here they wanted to do biblical art, but there were no buyers. I mean, you do need to buy your canvases, you need money for your paints, you need, if you're going to take it forward, you want somebody to encourage, like the way I was encouraged when I first had my show. I was able to move forward because I had people coming and buying it off the walls, even while we were hanging it out, John and me. So that is not what we are getting from the people here who are Christians, who are following Christ. We don't see them coming to the exhibitions to see.
So what is the way then, Sabrina? I mean, you're such an experienced person in this. What's the way that one can, as artists, promote biblical art? I mean, it's fairly well known overseas. How do we do this in India?
One of the things that's discouraging the actual artists are there are so many posters of Christian art, so that people don't want to invest in something that, so much of money. They would rather have a poster that costs maybe, 100 rupees. Why should they pay thousands for an artist who they do not know about in this field? Maybe they know about me. Maybe that's why in Delhi I was able to sell a few. But in Chennai, in Bangalore rather, we didn't have any takers.
Right. Have you studied over the course of the years which parts of the world and which part of the Bible itself is well known? Like, where, for instance, art that is sold and, people who paint overseas, what is it that sells for them over there, I wonder?
Maybe it's because they're already well-known artists.
But you're a well-known artist?
Yes. But in India, I'm known just for horses. So they expect me to have an exhibition of horses, not of biblical art. And maybe the people who are here in India are not able to spend that much. We have very few maybe who are able to spend that much on Christian art. You must realize spiritually it's the masses and the people in India who are coming to know Christ. Many of them may not even have the money to put food on the table. But it's wonderful that they've gained salvation, right? But we do not have that, the people who have the money to encourage artists. It's maybe not in their heart to do so.
Now, is there any getting together of all the Christian artists in India?
Yes, we have a platform. And when I recently went to the Lusan, the 4th conference, I had...
It was where?
In South Korea.
South Korea.
We had a group of artists and we are trying to encourage each other. It's really here in the most South Pacific area. We are trying to see how we can have a getting together of minds and having small seminars where we can see how we can promote Christian art so that we can help the youngsters who are wanting to get into this field, to encourage them to be able to do this as a means of livelihood.
Right. So in South Korea, it was in South Korea, right? So why or what kind of people actually got together? Were they all artists? Were they all... why did they decide to do this then? Because they obviously see, maybe in their country too, they have the same issue.
Yeah. It was not... the conference was actually to glorify God, to declare Christ in the many avenues, whether we were taking all the problems that we might have, not just the artists. There was the aging population, there was corruption. Where can Christianity reach out and make a change in all of these? There were, I think, around 25 disciplines. So we were all, what interested me was art and corruption. So I went to these two groups and we formed a sort of a like-minded people. They're coming from, there were 5,000 of us who came from 200 countries, and we're all having the same problem, that biblical art is not such a great seller, not something that is in other nations. They are selling, but not in the way we expect as compared to secular art.
Tell me, do we have any Bible museums in India or any Bible, associations that look at things like this? Not necessarily only artists, but maybe the church authorities, maybe the people who have religious institutions. Do they even think about biblical art?
They don't. At the moment, they do not. Maybe they could be encouraged to, and to bring about more art into the church as such, to have something that will display through the artistic medium. Because when you look at, there are familiar sort of topics you can think of: Annunciation, the crucifixion, the resurrection. These are all things that we have pictures of from around the world, and we see it. And this is what brings to mind they actually went. The nativity, all of this. When you say nativity, immediately we think of Christmas and everything else. But here in India, we have to also do the art which is with the regional influence and have it with the Indian perspective. That is what artists in India have to be encouraged to do. Not imitate the Western world, but we have to do the art to be able to, with the influence that this region, the Indian region, with the Indian art, maybe it's the miniatures, take all that into consideration and do an art that is purely Indian, basically from the base upwards, to be able to showcase that this is Indian Christian art.
All right. I couldn't agree with you more, because we already have a tremendously Indian influence even within the church and within a lot of our church services, etc. So, senior experienced people like yourself, have you guys ever got together and thought, what's the way we can try to maybe get some publicity or for biblical art, Sabrina?
Yes, that's what we are trying to have, seminars every 2 months, and move forward to get the people in the media to showcase this, the art that is being put on the back burner. We have to encourage that, because we do have illustrated books, but again, that is not with an Indian concept. It's not, doesn't have the Indian influence in the styles that in which we get the Christian books, our Bibles. Everything has a very Western connotation, nothing which is Indian as such.
Right. What has been the response from the media towards biblical art? I know we would always see your work, your horses, emblazoned across newspapers and magazines, etc. But what has been the response from the media to the fact that you've switched horses midstream, as it?
I actually, I should correct you there. I have not switched, but I have included. It means a lot to me. I want to give and declare Christ, who has given so much to me. I want to do that.
So you're doing your biblical art along with your horses?
Oh yes, very much so.
You are. But then aren't you tempted then to just stick with the horses, because that's selling and biblical art is not?
Yeah, but then it has served me well. The horse paintings has served me well, and it's time for me to actually declare and glorify God who put that talent in me. It's a very spiritual enlightenment that came about, that it's not something that was just taken to be casual. It's something that I need to do right now to be able to tell the world what He has been to me. Because after all, it's Jesus Christ who has been the center of this world, and He's been the transforming force in my life. And even now, every life that He touches, He has transformed and given direction to that person. And He's still doing that in my life.
Right. Now, have you ever sold anything overseas? Have you taken your biblical art out of this country?
I wish I could get somebody to, take that, because I had for my horse art, I had an agent who took my work out of the country. Today, I would like to have such a person again who would take my work, not just mine, anyone else's, and be able to showcase Indian Christian art to the world.
I hope that, as a result of us talking here, we might have some kind of a response, because I really think that if we don't have, and I'm not talking about a business or market, but if we don't have exposure to our biblical art and art like yours, and that other artists as well, I think it would be wonderful if we could actually be promoting this. And I'm just wondering if there's any other way. Now, you said that in South Korea they had this conference that you went to. Has there been any invitations to you or other artists from other parts of the world? So far, do you know?
No, we have not had that. Like, I know there has been somebody who has gifted a biblical, a Christian art painting to the Vatican. But it's been a gift. It's not been bought by the Vatican. Okay. So we do need a lot more. And what's happening also in our country, that also should be showcased in art, because that is what will tell in history what is India going through. Where is the Christian world in the larger picture of the world? Where we as Christians, what are we doing here in India? And how can we place that in terms of a pictorial history in our books, our historical books?
Right. What sort of people would buy Christian art? What do you think?
The ones who are really, really doing, you would have people, there are many Christians who are, shipping magnates and who are owning big companies. They could step down and maybe encourage Christian art, because that is really putting historically what is happening amongst Christians today on a world picture, putting and showcasing it to the world as to what we are undergoing at the moment.
Right. I would imagine that senior people like yourselves have to get together to start this movement, as it were. I know you've already starting to try to do something, but I'm sure it needs a much bigger, much more focused light on what's happening. And I don't mean necessarily what's happening politically or anything else within our country, just the fact that this is God, this is Jesus, this is the art, we want you to enjoy it, we want you to see it, right?
Yes.
Would you think that that's a good way to go forward?
Of course,
Sabrina?
because we have been doing it through His Word. But now, when we have spirit-filled artists who can showcase and declare God, glorify Him in this manner, there should be people out there in India who are rich enough to come forward and encourage us to do better and to be able to show Christ as He is to each of us as individuals.
I'm going to ask you the question again. Tell me what Jesus looked like. You tell me, as an artist, how would you depict Jesus?
I would imagine that he had very simple clothes. He had no remarkable features, but his kindness, the eyes are what speaks. The kindness and compassion in his eyes is what I always look for. Whether it's the creations he created and he himself looked on each of us with compassion. That is what I would look, and I would like to paint his eyes.
Isn't that difficult, though, to paint somebody's eyes? Isn't that hard?
It is, but that's what we each have to have a goal. That's what we need to aim for something. And that's how I look at my God,
Right.
my Savior, one with somebody with compassion at eyes.
So, once again, what is it exactly that you would like to focus on in your art? A sequence, a happening, an event, people, how, what?
Usually I would do the still lifes where I'm trying to bring in elements, the crucifixion, the cross, which talks of what he did for me to get me out of the bondage of sin. The word, which is so powerful, a tool that gives direction. A lamp or a candle stand which tells me that Jesus is the light of the world. And then the flowers. When I think of flowers, it's the aroma of prayer which goes up to God. It's a way of worshipping Him. This is the still lives that I do and I'm very fond of. Next, I would go into certain events which are there in the Bible. For instance, we look at the prodigal son. We see how God waited and waited patiently. He's waited for each of us, including me, to come to accept Him. We have the person of Jonah, who was meant to go and give a message. He had a purpose in life, and he tried to run away from God. And God put him in the belly of the fish so that he could come to understand what it is, who's this amazing God, who even to the evil people of Nineveh, he said, go and tell them, because he wanted them to repent. And when Jonah thought they were too evil, they would not repent, God still said go, and they did repent. So this is a God who goes beyond the capabilities of man, and he encourages them to do what he created them to do. He created each of us individually with a beautiful purpose, and he helps us to accomplish that.
Right. Now, Sabrina, your work is all oil painting, isn't it?
Mainly oil paintings for biblical art, yes.
Why would you say that with so much conviction? That is it only that you would,
Not really. I would go into watercolors soon, because I have my forte, my strength is in watercolors. So I'd like to do that as well. But the certain events that I want to put forward, showing the characteristics of God at the moment, are coming to me. For instance, in a storm, you have a little bird and it trusts in God, just as we, in our storms and situations in life, we trust in God. And you can see that little bird. These are things that come to me more in an oil painting style than in the watercolors. So at the moment, I'm going where God is leading me.
Right. It seems to me that your paintings and your art itself is very much your own personal journey. Am I getting you right?
Correct. It's where I'm moving forward. I've absolutely been transformed by my God, and I'm still I'm not perfect. He's still perfecting me to do what He would want me to do. So I listen to the inner voice to help me to make the paintings. And even if people are just looking at it,
that's enough.
That's enough for me.
That's enough. Okay. Yeah. Sabrina, talking to you has been just such a wonderful experience for me today. I'm no artist, but I'm going away from this interview with a lot of hope and inspiration from what you are talking about, from what you are doing. May God bless you and keep you the way you are, and carry on with your wonderful work. And I hope that things will get better and better for you. Thank you so much, Sabrina. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Thank you for having me here.